A woman named Ruth Calloway lost 11 hens in one afternoon on a place outside Tulsa in the summer of 2001, and she had done nearly everything right. 2 waterers, a run half covered in shade cloth, water changed every single morning before the sun was properly up. What she had not done was move the metal fount off the gravel patch it had always stood on, the one spot in that yard that took full sun from 10 in the morning until past 4 in the afternoon. By 2 o'clock the water inside that fount had gone past 100 degrees, hotter than tea left standing. A hen will not drink water that hot, she would rather go without, and that afternoon 11 of them did. Ruth found the first one down at 2:30, wings spread flat against the dirt, beak open, not making a sound. By 4 there were 3 more. By evening, 11. Every one of them had been drinking normally that morning. Every one of them had feed still in their crops when it was over, feed they had eaten hours before, sitting there generating its own small share of heat while the sun did the rest of the work from outside. The vet who came out the next morning did not need a single test to tell her what had happened. He asked her one question: "Where does the waterer stand?" She pointed at the gravel patch, and he did not say another word. He just looked at the sun on it. 22,000 hens die of heat stress on farms across this country most summers, by the low estimates. 80% of a bird's heat loss in a crisis runs through her open beak alone, through panting, and nothing else. And past 75% humidity. A hen loses almost all of that. She cannot pant her way out of it anymore. She is just cooking from the inside with the lid on. Today, most folks who keep a few hens in the yard could not tell you a single one of those 3 numbers. They know summer is warmer than winter. That is about the size of it. Their grandmother knew more than that standing at her own coop door with a bucket in her hand, and she never read a single extension bulletin in her life. I am Angus Douglas, 5th generation on this hill on the west coast. 40 hens kept the way this ground allows, and my grandfather Hamish wrote a line in his tally book in 1961 that I still stand by every June. He wrote, "Summer kills slower than winter, and that is what makes it dangerous. Winter you can see coming. Summer just sits there looking friendly while it does its work." Here is what that costs you if you get it wrong. The feed store will sell you a bag of frozen corpse disposal, $40 after the fact. The feed store will sell you electrolyte powder, $12 a packet, for a bird already 3 hours past the point where it helps. The feed store will sell you a replacement pullet, $28, to fill the gap where a 2-year-old layer used to stand. Every one of those bills is the same bill. It is the bill for not knowing 5 things your great-grandmother knew without being told. But here is the twist, friend. None of what killed Ruth Calloway's birds that afternoon was a disease. It was not a virus, and it was not a predator. Mississippi State University Extension will tell you plainly that the first signs of heat stress in a flock are panting and drooping wings, and that the birds who die are very often the birds who were doing everything else right. Penn State Extension has it charted in 10-degree bands: ordinary discomfort at 85, real danger by 95, survival itself the question above 100. That is not folklore. That is a land-grant university putting a number on what your grandmother called common sense. Somebody made sure that common sense skipped a generation. Nobody banned it. Nobody has to ban a thing nobody is teaching anymore. A feed store does not sell you a shade tree. It sells you a mister kit, a cooling pad, and a bag of electrolytes. Every single one of them a patch on a mistake instead of the fix for it. Home economics classes in this country taught basic animal husbandry, including seasonal feeding and watering habits, right up until most of those classes were cut from public schools between 1968 and 1978. A whole generation grew up without ever standing in a classroom being told that summer asks something different of an animal than winter does. That gap did not close on its own, it just went quiet, the same way a hen in trouble goes quiet. Before we get into the 3 numbers to hold on to, because every one of them comes back around before we are done, 102 degrees. That is where a bowl of standing water gets to sitting in full sun, and it is the deepest one on this list, the one that killed Ruth Calloway's birds, and it is sitting in half the yards in this country right now, without anybody knowing its name. 75%. That is the humidity mark where a hen loses her only working tool for cooling herself down, and 80%. That is how much of her total heat loss runs through panting alone, which means the day you stop watching her beak is the day you stop watching the one instrument that would have told you she was in trouble. Now before I get into it, one thing and one time only. There is more of this than I can fit in any video. How to read a hen 3 days before she goes down. How to feed a flock off your own ground, month by month, winter included. What to handle yourself in the byre and what to lift the phone for. How my grandfather did the things he never wrote down. Every method I've never given out, I put all of it in a book at angusdouglaspoultry.com. Link in my description or scan the code on your screen. That is the only time you will hear me say it. Now let us get back to the video. None of these 5 faded because they quit being true. They faded because a feed store sells you the cure and never once mentions the cause. That is not on you, friend. Nobody stood you in front of your own coop in July and told you what to look at. And there is one sound a coop makes on the worst afternoon of the summer that tells you the trouble has already started before a single bird goes down. I will tell you what that sound is, but first, one quick word. Everything I know about keeping a flock cheap and catching trouble before it takes a bird, I have set it down properly. It is all at angusdouglaspoultry.com. The link is under this video. Right, back to the hill. That sound, friend, is silence. A yard full of 40 hens makes noise all day, scratching, muttering, the odd squabble over a dust patch. On the worst afternoons, that noise stops. Not because they are calm, because panting takes the breath a cluck would have used. You will hear it before you see it, if you know to listen. Keep that in your ear. We are coming back to it. Mistake number 5, and it is the one that carries that 80% figure I told you to hold on to. Watching a bird pant and deciding to wait and see. Your great-grandmother did not wait and see. She kept a bucket by the coop door all summer, and she was out there at the first open beak, not the third. Mississippi State Extension lists it plain, panting and drooping wings first, pale combs and lethargy after that, and by the time a bird stops moving at all, you are no longer preventing anything, you are trying to save her. The ladder has rungs, and every rung you skip costs you time you do not get back. Here is that number, the one from the top of this video. 80% of a hen's heat loss in a real crisis comes through panting alone, through that open beak moving air across a wet mouth and throat. She has no sweat glands anywhere on her body. That beak is nearly the whole system. Watch it, and you are watching her thermostat. Ignore it, and you are flying blind. Now the honest note, friend, before we go further. Panting alone is not an emergency. Every bird in your yard will pant some on a warm afternoon, and that is her system working exactly the way it should. It is panting that does not stop when she moves into shade, panting paired with a wing held out and down. That is the point where watching turns into acting. The feed store will sell you a thermometer for the coop wall, $16, and tell you that is monitoring. It is not. A wall thermometer tells you what the air is doing. It tells you nothing about what a particular bird is doing with it. A heavy old layer 3 years old will go down at a temperature a young leghorn shrugs off. You cannot read that off a wall. Here is the method. Walk the run at midday in June and July, every day, not some days. Count open beaks. 1 or 2 panting lightly in full sun is normal. Get them water and shade and move on. Wings held out and down away from the body is the next rung. That bird is working harder than panting alone can manage. Pale or grey comb after that. A bird sitting flat, not moving when you approach, is the last rung before collapse, and at that point you lift her yourself, into shade, into a container of cool, not cold, water up to her breastbone, and you do not wait for her to decide to cool herself. Now the honest note, friend. Do not put a hot bird straight into ice water. Sudden cold shock on top of heat stress can kill her almost as fast as the heat would have. Cool, not cold. Gradual, not sudden. That is the difference between saving her and finishing the job the heat started. Nobody built a law around watching a chicken breathe. The Chicken of Tomorrow contest of 1948 run through A&P stores with backing from the United States Department of Agriculture. Picked birds for how fast they put on meat on a bag of feed, and heat tolerance was never on the score sheet. 70-odd years of breeding for growth and lay rate bred a good deal of that old hardiness clean out of most commercial stock, and nobody replaced the knowledge of what to watch for with the birds that needed watching more than ever. That is your first bill, and it is free to pay. A count of open beaks, twice a day, June through August. Watch the beak, save the bird. First pattern break, friend. Here is where this stops being one habit and starts being the reason a feed store shelf gets restocked every single July. Everything on this list is the same, forgetting wearing a different coat, and there is a number coming at the very top of this count, past 100, that ties every single one of these back together. The next one they sell you feed for at exactly the wrong hour of the day. Mistake number 4. Feeding a full ration of corn and scratch grain at noon in July. Your great-grandmother fed heavy at dawn and light at dusk in the hot months, and she never called it a strategy, she called it common sense, because a hen working through a crop full of corn in the heat of the afternoon is a hen generating heat from the inside, while the sun is doing the same job from the outside. Here is the mechanism, and it is not folklore, it is basic digestion. Digesting feed produces heat inside the bird's body, what a nutritionist would call the heat increment of feeding, and corn and scratch grain, being starchy and dense, produce more of it per pound than a lighter ration does. Feed that load into a bird at 2 in the afternoon in 95-degree heat, and you have handed her a second furnace on top of the one already running. The feed store sells you the exact same bag of scratch corn in July that it sells you in January, $8 for 25 pounds. No warning printed on the label about when to use it. Purina built the modern scratch grain business, marketing it as a treat you could feed any time of day, and that habit rode straight through into summer without anybody adjusting it for the season. Here is the method. Cut scratch grain and corn out of the ration entirely from June through August, or push it to first light and last light only, small handfuls, never a full feeding. Move the main ration to the cool of early morning before 7, and again in the last hour before dusk, when the birds can process it overnight in cooler air. In the heat of midday, offer nothing heavier than a scattering of watermelon rind, cucumber, or leafy greens, which cool a bird from the inside through their water content rather than heating her from the inside through digestion. Now the honest note, friend, cutting feed too far back in the heat costs you eggs, because a bird underfed and overheated stops laying faster than one properly fed at the right hour. This is not about feeding less. It is about feeding at the hour that does not fight the thermometer. There is a second insight tucked inside this one that most keepers never hear. A hen's water intake roughly doubles in real summer heat compared to a mild spring day, because she is drinking to replace what panting costs her, not just to satisfy ordinary thirst. Feed her a heavy starchy ration at the hottest hour, and you have raised her water demand at the exact moment her water, if you have made mistake number 2 as well, is least fit to drink. These two mistakes do not sit side by side in a yard. They compound each other. That is a bag of corn moved 2 hours earlier in the day, and it costs you nothing at all. Feed at dawn, not at noon. The next one is a habit built for a season that is not this one. Mistake number 3. Shutting the coop up tight at night the same way you shut it in January. Your great-grandmother opened every vent she owned once June came in, and she left the pop-hole wider through a summer night than she ever would have in a hard frost, because a coop built to hold heat in through a Highland winter will hold heat in through a July night with exactly the same efficiency, and 40 hens packed onto a roost bar generate a surprising amount of warmth of their own with nowhere for it to go. Here is that second number from the top of this video. Past 75% humidity. A chicken loses almost all of her ability to cool herself by panting because the air around her is already too full of moisture to carry any more away from her lungs. A sealed coop overnight, 40 birds breathing and manuring into a small closed volume, will run past that humidity mark on a still summer night, whether the outside air ever does or not. Birds have gone down overnight in coops that felt perfectly cool to the keeper standing at the door in the morning, because the keeper was standing in moving air and the birds were not. The coop kit industry that grew up through the big box stores and the online catalogues from the 1990s onward built most of its small coops to a winter photograph. Tight seams, small vents up near the roofline, good for holding heat against a cold night, and never revisited for what that same tight little box does to airflow in August. Nobody engineered that on purpose to hurt a bird. Nobody engineered it for summer at all. Here is the method. From June through August, every vent stays open, day and night, no exceptions, for a cool evening that feels comfortable to you at head height. Cross-ventilation matters more than total vent size. Air needs an entry point low and an exit point high to actually move through the space rather than just sitting in it. If your coop only vents from one side, prop the far side open at night behind hardware cloth, half-inch mesh, tight enough that nothing gets in through it. Roost bar spacing matters here too. Birds crowded shoulder to shoulder trap each other's body heat, so give a standard hen 10 to 12 inches of roost length in summer rather than the 8 you might get away with in winter. Now the honest note, friend. An open coop at night is an invitation to anything that can dig, climb, or squeeze through a gap smaller than you would think possible. Ventilation and security are not the same problem, and one cannot be sacrificed for the other. Hardware cloth, not chicken wire, over every open vent, checked for gaps every single week of the summer. That is a hasp left unlatched on a vent door, and nothing more. Airflow costs you nothing but the checking. Second pattern break, friend, and we are past halfway now. You are seeing the shape of it, are you not? Every single mistake on this list is the same mistake wearing a different coat. It is treating summer like winter's opposite instead of its own separate danger, and every feed store shelf in this country is stocked to sell you the fix for the symptom and never once mention that the season itself is the cause. Number 2 on this list is the one on the thumbnail, and it is the one that killed Ruth Calloway's birds, and it very likely stands in your own yard right now without you ever having given it a second look. Mistake number 2, the waterer standing in full sun. Here we are, friend, the one I told you about at the very start of this. A metal fount, or a plastic one, it makes no difference, standing on the same patch of gravel or grass it has stood on since spring, never moved for the season, taking direct sun from mid-morning straight through the hottest part of the afternoon. Water in a container like that will climb past 100 degrees on an ordinary July day, hotter than a kettle left off the boil, and a hen faced with water that hot will simply stop drinking it rather than force it down. That is the whole mechanism, and it is almost insultingly simple once you see it. A bird who has stopped drinking in 95-degree heat is a bird with no working cooling system left at all, because water is the raw material her entire heat defense runs on, the moisture in every panted breath. Take the water away by making it undrinkable, and you have not just failed to help her, you have actively disarmed her. There is a second half to this same mistake, and it is nearly as deadly as the first. Sunlight on a clear or lightly coloured waterer grows algae, fast, because algae needs exactly 4 things to thrive: water, warmth, light, and the nutrients that blow or splash or get scratched into any open container in a chicken yard. A galvanized metal container blocks that light and slows the growth considerably. A clear plastic one in full sun can turn green inside 3 or 4 days in real summer heat, and that green film is not just unsightly, it is a growth medium for the same bacteria that make a bird sick from the inside while the heat is already working on her from the outside. The feed store sells you the exact same fount, painted red, painted green, whatever finish looks good on the shelf, with no instruction anywhere on the box about where in the yard it belongs. The chain feed stores expanded hard through the 1990s, selling standardized waterers built for looks and low cost, never for shade, and the backyard keeper hung it where it was easiest to fill, not where it was safest to stand. Here is the method. 2 waterers minimum, in 2 different shaded spots, so a knocked over or dried out fount never leaves a bird with nothing. Every waterer under a roof, an awning, a piece of shade cloth or simple tree cover, moved through the day if the shade moves, checked at midday specifically, not just at morning fill-up. Water changed and the container scrubbed daily in the hot months, not weekly, with a stiff brush, because a rinse alone does not touch a biofilm once it has taken hold. A galvanized or dark-colored container over a clear one wherever you have the choice, because blocking the light does most of the work of blocking the algae before you ever add a drop of anything else. And where you can manage it, a splash of ice into a shaded waterer at midday brings the temperature down without shocking a bird who is drinking normally rather than one already in crisis. A wall-mounted nipple drinker, kept out of direct sun the same as any other fount, cuts the algae problem down close to nothing on its own because the water inside never sits open to the light the way it does in a bowl or a trough. It costs more upfront than a galvanized fount, somewhere around $20 for a basic kit, but it is one purchase against a daily scrubbing habit you have to keep up for 3 months straight every single year. Now the honest note, friend, a shaded waterer left unscrubbed will still grow algae. Shade only slows the clock, it does not stop it. And do not chase this with bleach in a metal container, it reacts with the galvanizing. Plain hot water, a stiff brush and a rinse every single day in summer. 1 hen, 1 bowl, hot enough she'd rather go thirsty. Move the fount, save the bird. The first flock I ever ran on my own, back in 2003, I left that same fount sitting on the same sunny stretch of yard all June because that patch was closest to the tap and I was not about to carry water any further than I had to. Hamish never said a word about it directly. He just walked past it one Tuesday afternoon, put the back of his hand flat against the metal and looked at me until I understood what he was telling me without him having to spell it out. I moved it that evening. I have not left a waterer in full sun a single summer since. You will get something wrong your first year, friend. Everybody does. The old man had to teach me with a look instead of a lecture, same as somebody should have taught you before you ever needed it. Now the honest disavow, before we finish. That red cross on the thumbnail is not telling you the waterer itself is the enemy. It is not a bad piece of equipment. It is telling you the spot it is standing in is the enemy, and that is a difference worth being exact about. Move the same fount 6 feet into shade, and it becomes one of the safest things in your yard, instead of one of the deadliest. This is not a video telling you to throw out your equipment. It is a video telling you where to put it. Third pattern break, friend, and the last one. From here to the top of this count, we are looking at the one mistake that made the other 4 possible in the first place, the one sitting underneath all of them. And now the one that ties every other one of these together, friend. Mistake number 1, believing summer is the easy season. Every keeper who has ever lost a bird to a Highland winter respects winter. They watch the thermometer, they bank the straw, they check the water for ice twice a day without being told to. Then June comes in, warm and green, and every one of those same instincts goes quiet, because warm feels safe and green feels generous, and nothing about a sunny July afternoon looks like danger the way a foot of snow does. That is the whole trap, friend, and it sits underneath every single mistake on this list. The bird that dies of heat does not die of anything as obvious as cold does. She does not shiver where you can see it from across the yard. She goes quiet and stops eating a little, and stands with her wings held a little wider than usual, and by the time it looks like an emergency to an untrained eye, she has already been in one for hours. Winter kills loud, summer kills quiet, and quiet is exactly the kind of danger a feed store has never once had to build a product around, because you cannot bottle vigilance and sell it back to somebody in a bag. That is not on you, friend. Nobody sat you down before your first July with a flock and told you the season that looks the kindest is the one that asks the most of you. Your great-grandmother knew it because she had no other choice, standing at that coop door every single day with a bucket in her hand, watching beaks and combs and wings because there was no extension office to call and no video to watch. Now you know it too, and knowing it is most of the whole battle. Now the honest note, friend, and it is the last one. A hen's comb will pale and flatten a little in real heat even in a bird who is managing fine. So a pale comb alone on a bird who is still eating, still moving, still drinking normally is not cause for panic on its own. It is the combination that tells you the truth. Comb and beak and stance together, never just one sign standing alone. Learn to read the whole bird, not one part of her. None of these 5 mistakes faded because they quit being true. Nobody banned the shade tree, friend. Nobody outlawed watching a bird pant. They just built you a feed store full of cures for a problem nobody ever explained the cause of, and they let one warm, green, generous-looking season talk you out of the vigilance you would never have questioned in a snowstorm. That is not on you. They are very good at making summer look easy. Now, before I let you go, the honest word every one of these videos needs, friend. I am not a veterinarian, and nothing here replaces one. If you have several birds go down inside the same short window, that is not a heat afternoon anymore. That is a call to your state veterinarian or your local extension office, said plainly, no exceptions. Rules on flock size, on shade structures, on how many birds you can keep at all, run different from one county to the next and one state to the next in your own country, so know your own rules before you build anything I have described tonight. So here is what I need from you, friend. Pick one, not the whole list, one. Start with whichever of these costs you the least and climb from there if you have it in you this week. Cheapest first. Move your feed schedule. Nothing to buy, nothing to build. Just a full ration at dawn and dusk and nothing heavier than greens at midday, starting tomorrow morning. Next, proper vent. Walk your coop tonight and open every one you have been closing out of winter habit, and pin a square of hardware cloth over anything you open that was not open before. After that, start counting beaks. Twice a day, 2 minutes each time. Write nothing down if you do not want to. Just look. Morning and mid-afternoon, every day through August. And the one on the thumbnail, the one I need you to do before any of the others if you do only one thing tonight. Walk your yard at 2 o'clock this afternoon and put your own hand flat against the side of every waterer you own. If it is hot to the touch, move it into shade before you do another single thing today. That is the cheapest fix on this entire list, and it costs you nothing but the walk. I moved my own fount off that sunny gravel patch back in 2003, and I have not lost a bird to heat since, not one, in 20-odd summers on this hill. That is not luck, friend. That is a 5-minute walk with the back of my hand out, twice a day, June through August. Tell me down below, friend, did your grandmother lose a bird to a hot summer the way Ruth Calloway did? What did she do differently after that? Did she move the fount, or was it something else nobody ever wrote down? The one that gets the most comments is the one I build next. Somebody just never got the chance to sit you down before your 1st July with a flock and tell you which season actually asks the most of you. Now you know. Now you are one of the keepers. Next time, I am counting down the old cooling tricks your great-grandmother used before anybody had ever heard the word Mr. Kit, including the one trick using nothing but a wet sack and a breeze that the feed store has never once found a way to put a price tag on. And there is a breed on that list the Livestock Conservancy says has fewer than 300 left in this whole country, and I need you to hear its name. If you mean to keep the old ways alongside me, stay on the hill with me. There are a good deal more of us than the feed store wants you thinking there are. Keep the birds, and the birds will keep you. If you enjoyed this, watch this next video on your screen.